Flying with the Thunderbirds was a special mission, and it was a special flying that every fighter pilot and every pilot really wanted to do. When I got out of high school in '51, the focus was military, and my very hard focus was flying. I wanted to fly. So the first thing I did was go to the Navy recruiter. The old chief in the Navy enlistment office said, well, Larson, you've got to understand one thing. The Navy is all about ships at sea. If you want to fly, come with me next door to the Air Force recruiter. We went next door and I talked to the Air Force recruiter, and he said, okay, if you want to be an aviation cadet, you've got to have 2 years of college in order to qualify. I went to Ohio Northern University from my hometown in Jamestown, New York, and finished a year, ran out of money, and then went back to Jamestown where they just opened a community college, finished the second year, and then went back to the Air Force recruiter, and he signed me up for aviation cadet class 55I. Started in 53 in February. Well, 2 months before that, I got a letter from the Army saying, you are inducted in the Army. So I went back to the Air Force recruiter, said, hey, what do we do about this? I want to go to the aviation cadet program. And he said, well, there's only one way that we can get around this induction notice. I'll enlist you in the Air Force today, which I did. So I enlisted in the Air Force in 53 and went through basic training. And finally my class came up in February, and I went down to Randolph for the pre-flight, and from there into the basic, the preliminary flight training. They needed pilots as a result of the Korean issue. Many civilian aviation entities were asked by the military to put together flying training programs. So my instructors were basically ex-crop dusters, and they were good. Later on, when I went through the 03 squadrons, went to Korea, went back to Bunker Hill as a squadron pilot, second lieutenant, went down to my third squadron in Louisiana, England Air Force Base. And from there, I wanted to go to the fighter weapons school as a student in the advanced weapons program. And I was selected to do that. While at Nellis, in that program, I saw the Thunderbirds perform for the first time. And that was fascinating to me. That kind of flying and that precision and that challenge was something that I wanted a part of. So when I got back to my base at England Air Force Base, I wrote the leader a letter. I had by that time maybe 150 hours in the F-100, and they had just updated to the F-100. So he read my letter and thought, well, that lieutenant may have some capability here, and I'll call him out and we'll take a look. So I went out to Nellis and flew with the Thunderbirds, I think, a couple of times, had a lot of interviews, and was selected. When I joined the team in '60, I took over that role as solo. And I was very satisfied with it because it was a very challenging and demanding job. The mission of the Thunderbird at that time was to acquaint the audience with the capability of the current machines, the pilots, the airplanes, and the crews that maintained them. F-100 was a great airshow airplane. It was bigger. The paint job just was astounding and got everybody's attention. It was maneuverable. You could go fast or slow and make a lot of noise, and it was a great show. Robert Fitzgerald was the leader of the Thunderbirds, a great leader. Unfortunately, Fitzgerald was killed in an airplane mishap, and a new leader came aboard as I finished my first year, and that was Major Hoot Gibson. Gibson was a great aviator. He was an ace from Korea, a great aviator. We had a schedule lined up to go to Central and South America. So Hoot Gibson had a big job to fill. The South American tour was a friendship tour. The people in Central and South America had never seen or had any experience with jet aircraft. So one of the first things when we went into Guatemala, where the president of the country thought, well, the team is here, and I know they're flying supersonic airplanes, and I'd kind of like to hear a supersonic pass by. We tried to talk them out of it as a bad idea, because we knew that windows would break and animals would be all upset and people would not really know. But he said, not to worry, I'll set it up on the radio and I'll tell people what the supersonic pass is all about. But I did give him a supersonic pass to open the air show, and that was a big hit. Then we got down to Quito and had a great turnout at Quito. The word had gotten around South America. The only trouble was when we were during the air show, everybody crowded onto the runway. There was no crowd control at Quito. That was a serious problem because at the end of the air show, we only had 8 to 10 minutes of fuel. We had to land at Quito. There was no alternate available, and our fuel was getting down to the minimum. So Fitz said, okay, Jerry, make a high-speed pass, see if we can clear the runway. So I went, gave him a high-speed pass, low, over the heads of all the people on the runway, in burner. It didn't work. Everybody on the runway thought that was just another part of the show. Well, coming back, I said, okay, that didn't work, we'll try a slow-speed pass. So I dropped gear and flaps and came down the runway rocking and trying to get people to move from the runway so we could land. That didn't work. They thought that was part of the air show. So I had one more thought in mind, and that was smoke on. So the next runway, the next pass down the runway was gear flaps, slow speed, smoke on. That did the trick. It's hard to breathe with all that smoke on the center of the runway. So everybody had to move off to the side of the runway where the smoke was so that they could breathe. Well, we got back on the ground. But that was a big worry for a long time. Hoot was very open to adding maneuvers or changing the air show from what it had been previous to 1961 when he came aboard. I was able to talk to him about what we could do with the second solo pilot. And fortunately, the rest of the team thought maybe that'd be a good idea, or at least they weren't against it. We did think that the next pilot that we got on the team would be a second solo, and that was Bob Moore. So Bob and I put together the dual solo routine. In our training to start, we always worked a runway. I would stay on my edge of the runway, he would stay on his edge of the runway. So when we were passing each other, we had most of the runway space between us. When we got that down to where we were both confident in each other and what the maneuvers were, we then used the center line of the runway as a separator. I'd stay on my half, he'd stay on his half. The first solo, double solo, was in Palm Springs. On only one maneuver, Bobby said he was too interested in looking at the scenery and forgot that it was his time to join up where we could do the opposing point and rolls. But at the last minute, he said, oh, I've got to be back there. And he went burner, came back to my end and joined up in the fastest join up ever made in the F-100, I'm sure. Everybody on the team was a volunteer, including the maintenance people, and they were excellent. Always there any time of the day or night, fix the airplane, And we never canceled the show. I look at that performance today and I say, we had the best of times because the solos now are working to death. They're joining up with the diamond. They're separating to do individual passes. They're joining up with the other solo to do their dual passes. So they're really working, where back in my day, it just seemed like, single and double. It was just a lot of fun with not a lot of sweat going on. Today is a different show, and it is spectacular.